Okay, I'm live. I'm fixing the camera just in case. But hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. Today is day 49 of the plan, and so yesterday I recorded 2 days ago for me. I recorded yesterday and the day before that, and so I kind of got off a little off track, and I forgot to record until kind of late tonight. So I doubt anyone's watching right now. Someone just joined. It says I'm not really sure. It says it got right back off. But I'm not really sure how many people are going to really notice that I didn't record for until kind of late. But I realized I didn't record, and so I'm making this 8:26 instead of like normal time, like 12 to 4, depending on if it's a weekday or like school day or I'm at home. But anyways, it's day 49. I'll be reading Joshua 5 through 8. And I'm really glad to have it back on track now, where it's like the last number is a multiple of 4. It makes it way easier for my brain. But anyways, Joshua chapter 5. And in case you're wondering, Joshua, let's see how long Joshua is. Joshua is 24 chapters. So yeah, this is kind of a long stream already. But let's get started. Chapter 5. Circumcision of the Israelites. When the Amorite kings across the Jordan to the west, and all the Canaanite kings in the sea heard how the Lord had dried up the water in Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over, they lost heart and courage failed because of the Israelites. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelite men." Again, so Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelite men at Geratha Haraloth. This is the reason Joshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Egypt were males. All the men of war had died in the wilderness along the way until they came out of Egypt. The other people who came out were circumcised. None of the people born in the wilderness along the way were circumcised after they had come out of Egypt. For the Israelites wandered in the wilderness 40 years until all the nations men of war who came out of Egypt had died off because they did not obey the Lord. So the Lord vowed to never let them see the land He had sworn their fathers to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. He raised up their sons in their place. It was these Joshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised since they had not been circumcised along the way. After the entire nation had been circumcised, they stayed where they were in the camp until they recovered. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have for a little way the disgrace of Egypt from you." Therefore that place is still called Gilgal today. Food from the land. While the Israelites camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, they observed the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month. The day after the Passover, they ate unleavened bread and roasted grain from the produce of the land. And the day after they ate from the produce of the land, the manna ceased. Since there was no more manna for the Israelites, they ate from the crops of the land of Canaan that year. Commander of the Lord's army. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied. "I have now come as commander of the Lord's army." Then Joshua bowed his face to the ground in worship and asked him, "What does the Lord want to say to his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did that. Chapter 6. The Conquest of Jericho. Now Jericho was strongly fortified because of the Israelites. No one was leaving or entering. The Lord said to Joshua, "Look, I have handed Jericho, its king, and its best soldiers over to you. March around the city with all the men of war, circling the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram horn trumpets in front of the ark. But on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. While the priests blow their trumpets, when there's a prolonged blast on the horn, you hear its sound. Have all the troops give a mighty shout. Then the city wall will collapse, and the troops will advance, each man straight ahead." So Joshua son of Nun summoned the priests and said to them, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets in front of the Ark of the Lord." He said to the troops, "Move forward, march around the city, and have the armed men go ahead of the Ark of the Lord." After Joshua had spoken to the troops, 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets before the Lord moved forward and blew the trumpets. The Ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. While the trumpets were blowing, the armed men went in front of the priest, who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard went behind the ark. But Joshua commanded the troops, "Do not shout or let your voice be heard. Don't let one word come out of your mouth until the time I say, 'Shout.' Then you are to shout." So the ark of the Lord was carried around the city, circling it once. They returned to the camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning. The priests took the ark of the Lord, and 7 priests carrying the trumpets marched in front of the ark of the Lord. While trumpets were blowing, the armed men went in front of them, and the rear guard behind the ark of the Lord. On the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. Early on the seventh day, they started at dawn and marched around the city 7 times. In the same way, in the same way. That was the only day they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priests blew the trumpets, and Joshua said to the troops, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and everything in it are set apart for the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and everyone with her house will live, because she hid the messengers we sent. But keep yourselves from the things set apart, or you'll be set apart for destruction. If you take any of those things, you'll be set apart from the camp of Israel for destruction and make trouble for it. For all the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go in the Lord's treasury." So the troops shouted, and the trumpet sounded. When they heard the blast of the trumpet, the troops gave a great shout, and the wall collapsed. The troops advanced into the city, each man straight ahead as they captured the city. They completely destroyed everything in the city, every man and woman, both young and old, every ox, sheep, and donkey. Rahab and her family spared. Joshua said to the 2 men who had scouted the land, Go to the prostitute's house and bring the woman out of there, and all who are there with her, just as he swore to her." So that the young men who had scouted and went in and brought Rahab and her father, mothers, brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought her whole family and settled them outside the camp of Israel. They burned the city and everything in it, with the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron, into the treasury of the Lord's house. However, Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, her father's family, and all who belonged to her, because she hid the messengers Joshua sent to spy on Jericho. And she still lives in Israel today. Or that means when that was written, she still lived in Israel at that time. At the time Joshua imposed this curse, the man who undertakes the rebuilding of the city of Jericho is cursed before the Lord. He'll lay its foundation at the cost of his firstborn. He'll finish its gates at the cost of his youngest. And the Lord was with Joshua, and the fame spread throughout the land. The feet at Ai. It's spelled A-I. Not really sure what it's supposed to be. Chapter 7. The Israelites, however, were unfaithful regarding all the things set apart for destruction. Chan, son of Carmi, son of Zebedi, son of Sarah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of what was set apart, and the Lord's anger burned against the Israelites. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth Aven, east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and scout the land." So the men went up and scouted Ai. After returning Joshua, they reported to him, "Don't send all the people there, but send about 2,000 or 3,000 men to attack Ai, since the people are few. Don't wear out all our people there." So about 3,000 men went up there, but they fled from the men of Ai. The men of Ai struck down about 36 of them and chased them outside the city gate to the court, striking them down on the descent. As a result, the people lost heart. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord until evening, as did the elders of Israel. They put dust on their heads. "O Lord God," Joshua said, "why do you ever bring these people across the Jordan and hand us over to the Amorites for our destruction? If only we had been content to remain with the others outside the Jordan. What can I say, Lord? Now that the Israelites it's turned back and running from our enemies. When the Canaanites and all who lived in the land hear about this, they will surround us and wipe our name from the earth. Then what will you do about your great name?" The Lord said to Joshua, "Stand up, while you fall face down. Israel has sinned. They have violated the covenant that I appointed them. They had taken some of the well set apart. They had stolen, deceived, and put those things with their own belongings. This is why the Israelites could not stand against their enemies. They will turn their backs and run from their enemies because they have set apart for destruction. I'm not going to be with you unless you can remove from among you what is set apart. Go and concentrate the people. Tell them to concentrate themselves for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are things that are set apart among you, Israel. You will not be able to stand against your enemies until you remove what is set apart. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe of the Lord come forward by clan by clan. The clan of the Lord selects it is to come forward family by family. The family of the Lord selects to come forward but man by man. The one who is caught with the things set apart must be burned along with everything he has because he has violated the Lord's covenant and committed an outrage of Israel. But Shan judged. Joshua got up early the next morning. He had Israel come forward tribe by tribe, and the tribe of Judah was selected. He had the clans of Judah come forward, and the Serahite clan was selected. He had the Serahite clan come forward by the heads of families, and Zebdi was selected. He had Zebdi's family come forward, man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, at the tribe of Joshua, was selected. So Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and make a confession to him. I urge you, tell me what you've done. Don't hide anything from me. Achan replied to Joshua, it's true, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I did. When I saw among the spoils of a beautiful cloak from Babylon, 5 pounds of silver and a bar of gold weighing 1.25 pounds, I coveted them and took them. You can see for yourself, they are concealed in the ground near my tent, inside my tent, with silver under the cloak. So Joshua sent messengers who ran to the tent. There was a cloak concealed in his tent, with silver underneath. They took the things inside the tent and spread them out at the Lord's presence. Then Joshua and Israel with him took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the cloak, and the bar of gold, his sons and daughters, his ox, donkey, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had, and brought them to the valley of Ashur. Joshua said, why have you brought us to trouble? Today the Lord will bring you to trouble. So Israel stoned them to death. They burned their bodies, threw stones on them, and raised them over a large pile of rocks that remains still today. Then the Lord turned his burning anger. Therefore the place is called Valley of Achor. Still here today. One chapter left. Chapter 8. Conquest of Ai. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid or discouraged. Take all the troops with you and go attack Ai. Look, I have handed over the king of Ai, his people, city, and the land. Treat Ai and kings as you did Jericho and its king, so that you may plunder, spoil, and livestock for yourselves. Send an ambush behind the city. So Joshua and the troops set out to attack Ai. Joshua selected 30,000 of his best soldiers and sent them out at night. He commanded them, pay attention, lie in an ambush behind the city, not too far from it, and all of you be ready. Then I and all the people who are with me will approach the city. Then they come out against us, and the first time we will flee from them. They will come after us until they have drawn them away from the city. For they will say, they are fleeing from us as before. While we are fleeing from them, you are to come out of your ambush and seize the city. The Lord your God will hand it over to you. After taking the city, set it on fire. Follow the Lord's command. See that you do as I've ordered you to do. So Joshua sent them, and they went to ambush side, waited between Bethel and Ai, in the west of Ai, but they spent the night with the troops. Joshua started early the next morning and mobilized them. Then he turned the elders of Israel who led the troops up to Ai. All those who were with them went up and approached the city, riding opposite of Ai, and they camped to the north of it, with a valley between them and the city. Now Joshua had taken about 5,000 men. I keep on yawning today. Joshua taking about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai, to the west of the city. The troops were stationed this way. The main camped to the north of the city and its rear guards to the west of the city. And the night Joshua went into the valley. When the king of Ai saw the Israelites, the men of the city hurried and went early in the morning so that he and his people could engage Israel in battle at a suitable place facing the Arabah. But he did not know there was an ambush waiting for him behind the city. Joshua and all the people pretended to be beaten back by them and fled toward the wilderness. They all the troops of Ai were summoned to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were drawn away from the city. Not a man was left in Ai or Bethel who did not go out after Israel, leaving the city exposed while they pursued Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Hold out the javelin in your hand and throw your hand toward Ai, for I'll hand the city over to you." So Joshua held out his javelin towards it. So when he held his hand, the men ambushed rose quickly from the position. They ran into the camp, captured it, and immediately set fire on it. The men of Ai turned and looked back, and the smoke from the city was rising to the sky. They could not escape in any direction, and the troops who had fled the wilderness now became the pursuers. When Joshua and all Israel saw the men in ambush had captured the city, and the smoke was rising from it, they turned back and struck down all the men of Ai. Then men in ambush came out of the city against them, and the men of Ai were trapped between the Israelite forces, some on the side and some on the other. They struck them down until no survivor or fugitive remained. They captured the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. When Israel finished killing everyone living in Ai, but pursued them pursued in the open country, when every last one of them had fallen by a sword, all Israel returned to Ai and struck down with a sword. The total of those who fell that day, both men and women, was 12,000, all the people of Ai. Joshua did not draw back his hand that was holding the javelin until the inhabitants of Ai were completely destroyed. Israel plundered only the cattle and spoil of the city for themselves, according to the Lord's command they had given Joshua. Joshua burned Ai and left it in permanent ruin, still desolate today. He hung the body of the king of Ai on a tree until evening and sunset. Joshua commanded that they take down the body from the tree. They threw it down at the entrance of the city gate and put a large pile of rocks over it, which still remains there. Renewed commitment to the law. At that time, Joshua built an altar in Mount Ebal to the Lord, the God of Israel, just as Moses, the Lord's servant, had commanded the Israelites. He built it according to what's written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones on which no iron tool had been used. Then they offered burnt offerings on the Lord's sacrifice, fellowship offerings on it. There on the stones Joshua copied the law of Moses, which had written all the presence of the Israel, all of the Israelites, all Israel, resident aliens, citizens alike, with their elders, officers, and judges, stood on either side of the ark of the Lord's covenant, facing Levitical priests who carried it. Half of them were in front of Mount Gerizim, and half in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the Lord's servant, had commanded earlier concerning blessings of the people of Israel. Afterward, Joshua read aloud all the words of the law, the blessings as well as the curses. According to all that is written in the book of the law, there was not a word that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read before the entire assembly of Israel, including the men, including the women, the dependents, and the resident aliens who lived among them. So that's all the reading for today. I really enjoy reading stuff like this way more than like numbers, because I feel like I'm actually just reading something enjoyable, and I'm not just reading a bunch of numbers, hence the name. But like in numbers, I don't feel like I'm reading like interesting actual history as much. I still feel like I'm reading history, but it just doesn't like entertain me, I guess, in the same way. I can't remember near as much of what happens because there's just so much. But when it comes to this, I can really remember it better. And so it's like it starts out talking about the circumcision of the Israelites and like how none of the people in that day and age had been circumcised yet, because all the people there that had died after they like didn't follow God. All the men of war, after 40 years, they all died. So then it talks about the food from the land. Basically, once they enjoyed like the food of the land, instead of the manna stopped falling because they no longer like needed it or anything like that. and then I like how it talks about the commander of the Lord's army. And so Joshua is near Jericho. And he walked up to, he saw a man with a drawn sword. He asked him, like, actually, what he asked, he said, "Are you for us or enemies?" He said, "Neither. I come commander of the Lord's army." So directly. So basically, it says right here, I was reading like the extra things that they think it might mean. So he's probably someone important or potentially an angel. I can't really tell. That those texts are really tiny that I'm trying to read, but he's commander of the Lord's army. And it talks about the conquest of Jericho. If you've ever heard the song "Joshua Fought the Battle at Jericho," then that's what it's actually talking about. How like they marched around the city gates and then they blew the horns and then all the walls came tumbling down or falling down. And so, yeah. And then it talks about a Chan judge because they weren't supposed to take anything from there. Nothing was supposed to remain except for Rahab. How do you say her name? I think it's Rahab, something like that. Because the prostitute, because she let the people that were spying on Jericho to begin with, she let them like hide out there. So her and her family, all of that stayed in her house, were allowed to live. And so then one person that did take something, even though he wasn't supposed to, was caught. I think it was the judging of him, and they got him and all the people like took stuff got stoned to death. And it talks about the conquest of I've said that the entire time. It's AI, however you want to pronounce that. But it talks about how because they still had stuff taken from the place they were supposed to take the stuff from, that they, even though I was a much smaller place, the Israelites would not defeat them because they like dishonored God or disobeyed God. But since they listened to God and did what God said, they like were able to kind of like they drew out all the soldiers, and then people came in the empty city, or not empty, but like no fighters in the city, and they destroy the city. And then when it's like the old soldiers try to run back, they're surrounded both sides, and they got completely destroyed. And it talks about their renewed commitment to the law, and it was over. So yeah, that is all for today. Had a good day so far. Have a great rest of your day. For me, there's not much left that I'm going to be conscious for. But yeah, goodbye.